Welcome to the Church Resource, where we talk about the best resources for pastors, leaders, and lay people. I'm your host, Jeff Oliver. Today we'll look at a book that I think is definitely something that needs to be on your shelf. I'll just say that right out of the gate. I think that it is something that is going to be ready reference for you as questions come up from the people you teach or preach to, or just within your own experience as you have questions that come up. What is this book? Well, it is Fast Facts on False Teachings. That's Fast Facts on False Teachings. It's by Ron Carlson and Ed Decker. Great names in the realm of looking into cults and into just other faith systems and how we can respond to those biblically, respond well as Christians, how we can even evangelize to these groups, and it really gives a great understanding of each of the faith groups and systems that they're looking into. Now, this one actually covers some 16 different religions, faith systems, and so we'll talk about that. Actually, 15 of them. There are 16 chapters, but 15 that they cover in this book. And so one thing to recognize there is just from the title, you can tell this is not as thorough as it could be. Now, they do go into great detail. They go into the main points of each of these religions and faith systems that they're talking about, but they're not going to be able to get into a lot of depth. There is a book that I have, and probably many of you have or have seen this book before. It is by Walter Martin called Kingdom of the Cults, and that looks, it's a over 1,000-page book. It's a huge book, and it really takes that to be able to thoroughly address the systems that they're looking at here. But this one is Fast Facts on False Teaching, so you're going to get a lot of bullet points. You're going to get very short statements about each faith system, and then again how we can respond to them biblically and Christianly, if I can use that to make that word up. It starts out with something that I think is very important for you to begin with in a book like this. Why defend the faith? In other words, why do we have to go into the realm of apologetics? It's going to explain what apologetics is, and that study of how to explain, how to defend the faith, and to explain to somebody what it is that you believe. And so why should we do that? Why is that important? And a great, almost academic exercise to do that, but I think it's important to set the foundation for this kind of book. Now, they do go into things like atheism, Buddhism, and then one as we step maybe out of the realm of looking at these individual faith systems just for a moment, we're going to look at a whole chapter on the character of God, because that is really what underpins everything else that is in this book. Of course, we looked at atheism, a system that believes in no God, Buddhism as well, that believes in no God, just higher beliefs and a system of thought, but not really God. And so now we look at the character of God, and what that is. That's a very quick, again, Fast Facts, that's a quick theology of who God is and his character, many of the attributes of God as well. Also, we look at things like evolution and so forth, and many of the world religions that you would recognize and you understand. Maybe you understand some of it, but again, it's great to have this kind of book, this resource, to be able to go and look very quickly at what some of these people believe, what their own texts will say, if there are texts involved, what some of their main philosophers say. I just think this is really well researched, and I think it's actually more difficult than writing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages on a particular topic, of condensing all of that down into this kind of book that is, I think, a good ready reference for you to be able to take very quickly, to be able to even, I can imagine, sneaking back into your study, reading a couple of pages, and then being somewhat informed, at least to talk intelligently about what it is that these faith systems, these beliefs are. So I think that's it's helpful in that way, very much so. I think they're going to talk about some things that will surprise you, some systems that you think, well, I wouldn't have ever thought of those, and I'll get to those in just a moment, but really handles a lot of these religions, and again, even belief systems that will call themselves Christian, and so we'll talk about that in a moment as well. So again, I mentioned this chapter of why defend the faith? That is important to look at. One of those that I think is interesting that maybe we wouldn't expect in here is a whole chapter on Freemasonry and the Masonic Lodge, and just some of the ways that this is very attractive to men. It is something that a lot of people put a lot of respect into, a lot of confidence in, and what they can, what the Masons have done, and what they the ways that the brotherhood works together and has done a lot of they've come behind a lot of causes, and they're very philanthropic. But they talk about, in this book, Carlson and Decker talk about what it is that sets the Masons apart, what makes them really cult-like, what makes them essentially another religion, that there are so many men who I have known, even in my life, and maybe you know some too, who put a lot of confidence in their Masonic lodge and into their Masonic teachings, but they also seem like very good Christians. They also seem like they're very active and faithful Christians. But they will show in this book that both of those streams of thought, their Christianity and Masonic teachings, cannot run on parallel tracks. They're not something that can be held together within the same person and be faithful to either one, really. So I think that, again, this is presented really well, thoroughly researched, and even looking into, as many of these chapters do, look into the teachings and the writings of each of these faith systems themselves. And so we can pull from those and see what they say about their own faith, about their system, and then we can then refute it and do it well, I think, to be able to come and do that in an intellectual way, in a very academically responsible way, to then refute some of the claims that each of these systems make, and specifically that of the Masonic Lodge in this case. So I want to point out one other here that is a chapter that, again, you remember I said that they look at some systems that are purporting to be Christian, but we can look at some of the basic beliefs of those systems and think, well, it really is not. It is something that is either just like what we would expect to see in any cult, in any faith system that's going to be essentially competing with historic Christianity, with what we understand as solid evangelical Christianity, and that is that it may add something to your belief system in order to be saved, for example, in order to be in right standing with God. It's going to add something. Often that's works. And in this case, we're looking at prosperity theology. So what's the problem with prosperity theology? Well, I won't spoil the book for you, but that's one chapter here, and I think it's well worth reading for anybody. If you just picked up this book and read that one chapter, because that type of theology is so pervasive in our society that even I was surprised to read that again and say, "Oh, I didn't really realize that was either going on, or that or how intrusive that is, how much this the particular part of their belief system is creeping into other parts, maybe even in my life or into churches that I know about." So it's I think important for us to be able to look at this kind of topic, this chapter that's in here on prosperity theology, and understand really that's the lay of the land as you look across and you see, on supposedly Christian television. A lot of times it's going to be prosperity teachers on there because it's very attractive. They promise a lot. They say that, if you would just do this, usually it's sending money. If you would send this money to me, then you'll be blessed, and they'll explain biblically how you'll be blessed by supporting their ministry, and they'll show you verse after verse, and they'll expound on that, and they really sound like they have something for you, that God is withholding a blessing from you because you haven't given enough money. And that is the point here of the prosperity theology chapter. I think it's well worth a read because there is so much of it that is all over our society and the Christian culture and landscape. So important for you to look at. Another thing that I'll point out here is there's a chapter on Roman Catholicism. And again, that might be a surprise to you as you look at, Christian faiths and to see how other denominations handle things. But then they're going to pull out this one on, remember, a book on false teachings, and pull out Roman Catholicism as something that is that needs to be looked at, and many of their beliefs that need to be addressed. Their where they focus their worship, where they focus their attention and their faith on things that are outside what we would call, again, historic Christianity or evangelical Christianity, that is additional to what is necessary for just a true faith, a pure faith that they're adding to. They're also dividing people and claiming to be the only true church, the only church that God blesses is their church. And that's one of the many traits and characteristics of a cult. It's something we need to watch out for. So Roman Catholicism, and again, that's all around us, especially depending on what area of the country you might live in or where you are in the world. There are places where it's more widespread than others, but certainly something for you to be aware of. I loved this book again, and I want to strongly recommend this to you. It is, again, Fast Facts on False Teachings, and a reference guide for you to be able to look at and, again, go to very quickly and see some of the main points, some of the arguments that are there, how to refute biblically then the claims of these faith groups and faith systems. So Ron Carlson and Ed Decker wrote this book, I think, heavily research and study these topics because they write about them all the time, and then to be able to boil that down into these short chapters to give you a reference guide to understand each of these and give you some, again, fast facts on false teachings. Well, this is one book from my shelves that has been helpful to me throughout my ministry. And I hope this gives you a bit of direction as you prayerfully consider which resources will best help you and the people you minister to. Thanks for listening to The Church Resource. Please make sure that you give us a review. And if you have any suggestions of resources that you would like us to look at, email us at thechurchresource@gmail.com. That's thechurchresource@gmail.com.